Okay, you're now streaming. Check on.
Oh, there it is. Okay.
Okay, so that's that. Now, let's see if I make you your co-host. Okay, now I think if I log off, I think you'll continue to
Good morning,
stream.
everyone.
Good morning.
So I'm going to leave the meeting.
So Carl is out today. So Dan and I are running the show.
I know. Jessica, could you say something? See if I can hear you.
Yes. Is this working?
Yes. No, it was on my side. I had my settings little wrong.
Not a problem. Dan will be doing the slides today, so he'll be controlling that.
Excellent. Thank you for that update.
All right, can you guys hear me? Okay. Just trying to get this, the screen sharing and the video and microphone to work at the same time. Madam Chair, I think we're good to call the meeting to order and do roll when you're ready.
All right. Clear my throat for that one then. All right, we'd like to welcome everyone to the February 9th, 2023 Landmarks Commission meeting. It's nice to see everyone, even though it continues to be virtually. In compliance with notification requirements of Ohio's open meeting law in section 101.021 of the codified ordinance of Cleveland, Ohio, 1976, notice of this meeting has been publicly posted. All boards and commissions under the purview of the City Planning Department conducts its meetings according to Robert's Rule of Order. Actions during the meeting will be taken by voice vote. Abstentions from any vote due to a conflict of interest should be stated for the record prior to taking any vote. In order to ensure that everyone participating in the meeting has the opportunity to be heard, we ask for you to keep your mic on mute. We then ask you to use the raised hand feature before asking a question or making a comment. The raised hand feature can be found in the participants panel on the desktop and mobile versions and activated by clicking the hand icon. Please wait for the chair or facilitator to recognize you and be sure to select unmute and announce yourself before you speak. When finished speaking, please lower your hand by clicking on the raised hand icon again and muting your microphone. We will also be utilizing the chat feature to communicate with participants. The chat feature can be activated by clicking the chat button located on the bottom of the WebEx screen. Call-in users can unmute by using *6. All meeting activities are being recorded via the WebEx platform. These proceedings are also being live streamed via YouTube. All requests to speak on a particular matter via the website and email have been considered. We have also received emails from those who have provided written comments on a particular matter. We'd like to call the February 9th, 2023 Landmarks Commission meeting to order. Mr. Musson, please call roll.
Ms. Anderson,
Here.
Mr. Venezzi,
Here.
Mr. Kalikia,
Here.
Mr. Dryer,
Here.
Mr. Edmond, Councilmember Gray, Director Wong,
Here.
Mr. Strickland,
Here.
Mr. Trasick, and Ms. Trott.
Here.
Madam Chair, we have a quorum. In addition to the commission members, we have Nathan Hall, a representative from the Law Department, as well as Jessica Beam and myself from the Landmarks office present. I'll be running these slides today, so if people giving presentations want me to advance, just let me know.
Excellent, thank you.
We'll go into the virtual meeting rules and procedures. Each project is considered on a case-by-case basis. The chair will call each agenda item and then each applicant will be invited to proceed through their presentation. Each presentation should be completed prior to questions and comments from the commission in order to facilitate a smooth presentation. Once the presentation is concluded, the chair will ask Landmark staff to summarize the design review committee recommendations and any public comments received. The deadline for public comments is noon on the Tuesday prior to any regularly scheduled Cleveland Landmarks Commission meeting. Any received comments are distributed to the commission members prior to this meeting. Staff will also identify any members of the public present and scheduled to speak. Public comment is allowed at the discretion of the chair, and any individual providing public comment is permitted 2 minutes to speak to the agenda item in which they have an interest. The chair will then request a recommendation from staff. The commission will then begin deliberations and project review. Any commission member, except for the chair, may make a motion at any point after an agenda item has been called.
We'll then transition to our certificates of appropriateness. We'll begin with our first applicant. We'd like to invite the first applicant forward to please announce yourself, unmute your mic, then announce yourself, and then tell us about your project. First applicant is the Evo Modern Mexican new signage. Is the applicant present? Yes. Mr. Freddy, sorry, I think I mispronounced your name there. Can you unmute your mic?
Can you hear me
There
now?
we go. We can hear you now.
Hey, James Vasey and Christy Alfredi of Signature Sign Company are both here.
Good morning.
Good morning.
We're here this morning to seek approval for new signage or a revised sign for Avo Mexican Restaurant. We have reduced the size from 5 foot to 8'4" and, or sorry, 4'8", and looking for the board's approval on the new signage there that we feel is appropriate for the such building.
Okay, if you don't mind just giving an overview of the size of this sign, just because I think it might be small on people's screen, and this is the first time Landmarks has seen it.
Okay, it's a circular sign, 4'8" in diameter. Double-sided projecting sign. Dan, you might want to go to the second page,
This one.
and if you want a actual picture of it, you can go back to page 2, or there you go. So that'll give everyone a little bit better idea of the signage that we're presenting.
All right. Any additional items you'd like to mention to the commission?
No, we're just open for questions from the commission if there are any. We just feel that this is very appropriate, given that obviously there's, a large tree there, and, we want to make sure people that they have adequate signage so people can find the restaurant.
Right. Thank you for the presentation. We'll move on to feedback from the local design committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This project was reviewed by the Ohio City Design Review Committee and approved as presented, but with the caveat that the sign is no larger than 4 feet.
All right, so what is up on the screen is different from that approval. And staff recommendations?
Staff recommends approval as presented. Given the context, the other signs on West 25th Street, just a few doors down, you have Campbell's Popcorn that's 6 foot. So we feel that going larger than 4 foot to the presented 4'8" is appropriate.
Thank you. I will now open up the floor for the commission for questions and comments. I guess I'll start us off and then Mr. Strickland can go. I think the sign is, I have no objections to the sign size based on the location and the precedence on the street. So I am in support of it. Mr. Strickland.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I would agree. I like the color, the simplicity, and I have no problem with the 4'8" size in this particular location. So I would support it as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Strickland. Mr. Bonezzi.
I will third that opinion, and in doing so, put forth a motion to approve this signage as presented for the applicant.
Thank you. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second, Mrs. Allen.
Thank you, Mr. Dryer. We have a second. Any further discussion? No. Mr. Musson, please call roll and announce results.
Ms. Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Benezzi,
Yes.
Mr. Colicchio,
Yes.
Mr. Dryer,
Yes.
Director Wong,
Yes.
Mr. Strickland,
Yes.
Mr. Trosick, and Ms. Trott.
Yes.
Madam Chair, the motion passes.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. We look forward to seeing your project, you move forward.
Okay, thank you.
We'll now move on to our second applicant, located at 603 Prospect Avenue East. New signage for Gracie's Slice Shop.
Good morning, Jessica Ruff here with Ruff Signs. How are you guys?
Good, thank you.
Good. So we are presenting some new signage. They're at 603 Prospect Street. And Dan, if you could move to page or the slide 3, please, for me. Page 3. Perfect. So this is representing interior neon signs that will read Slice Shop. They would be red in color. The background would have a vinyl graphic, and then the neon would be the border around each letter that would read Slice Shop. And we are proposing, I think this is one we're proposing a 31 square feet variance on for seeking approval for that one. And Dan, if you can move to the next slide, please. And this one would be the exterior sign that would read as proposed to Reese's Pizza Slice Shop. It would be a neon sign. The Reese's would be neon lettering. Again, the neon would border the letters as well as the arrow. And then Slice Shop would also be bordering. The neon would be bordered there with vinyl decals on the background of that. And we're seeking, this one was a 31 square feet variance request as well, as far as the size goes on this one. And then if we could go to the next slide. And this one would be the information signage. It's actually the bottom strip that we're looking at here that reads Bear Pizza and Booze. And this is that orange strip you see on the windows. We're seeking approval for that as well. And I think we're over on this one, 9.27. We're requesting approval on this one. And this is just vinyl decals on the windows. And the awnings that you see in the picture, they are existing. We are just recovering those. And then if you go to the next slide, this shows it in white. So we're either going to do the orange or the white, whichever is preferred. And then if you could go to the next slide. And this kind of just shows the overall concept. It's not to scale, as you see, Reese's is kind of above that window. So it's not, this was kind of just before we had all the sizes in place, we kind of just did a concept of, just so you guys could get the feel of what we're trying to propose here, kind of an old school pizza shop feel. So if there's any questions I can answer.
Excellent. Thank you for the presentation. We'll begin with design review feedback.
Thank you.
Yes, Madam Chair, this project went before the Historic Downtown Cleveland Design Review Committee last week. At that point, there was the informational signage that's now in the window was on the awning, so the committee asked that that be moved to the windows, which is reflected in this plan. They also recommended a 10% reduction in the projecting blade sign, which is also reflected in this plan. And that was the extent.
Excellent. Thank you. And staff report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As mentioned, this project does require variances. There's the 31 square feet variance on the projecting blade sign, a 32 square feet variance on the top window signs, the Slice Shop, and 7.27 on the orange or white band sign at the bottom. So the total variance for the window informational signs is 39.27 square feet. The blade sign, staff's opinion is the blade sign could be reduced to 24 square feet. It's currently at 43.5 square feet. The sign, the way that they determine that is the sign face area shall be measured to include the entire surface of the smallest single rectangle enclosing the sign panel. So that's kind of how they get that. And staff is supportive of the proposal with the blade sign being reduced. And the motions should be specific for the variances that are required.
All right. Thank you for that report. We'll now open the floor to the commission for questions and comments. Mr. Strickland.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'm very remote here. This morning, so the application is a little garbled, so I was a little confused with regard to the comments from the Design Review Committee, and I thought I understood the report to indicate that the sign has been reduced in size per the recommendation of local design review. So am I hearing now that the staff is recommending a further reduction in the size of that sign? Or are they okay with the sign adjustment based on local design review?
Yeah, the local committee asked for a 10% reduction, which has been reflected in these plans. Staff is recommending a further reduction in scale down to 24 square feet. So yes, your assessment is correct.
From the 31 square feet.
A little garbled there, but yes, from the proposed 31 square feet down to 24.
Right. So I don't have any problem with the 31 square feet as recommended by the. I like the design of the sign, the graphics, the colors. I don't have any problem with the window signs. I agree with the recommendation to take the lettering off of the face of the awning and moving it to the window. And I like the striped red, orange and white awning personally. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Strickland. Director Wong.
Yes. I have a question about the staff recommendation for the reduction. Would the reduction then fit within the zoning code and therefore not require a variance? I just want to clarify that.
It would still require a variance, but the variance
Oh.
would be a 12 square foot variance rather than a 31 square foot variance.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Richard Benesi.
Oh God, I triple clicked. Thank you, Madam Chair. It's just quite sad to see Vincenzo's go, so I'm happy to see something take its place. In thinking about the square footage of this sign, I believe, Jessica, you said that the square footage calculation is based off of basically a bounding box on the sign. Is that correct, right? Which leaves me a little perturbed on how to comment on this, particularly because this is an arrow. So even though in the actual signage size, which at first when I saw this, I was like, oh my God, it's a giant sign. And then I was thinking about where this was on the street, particularly Prospect. I have another question about this rendering. I was a little less bothered by the size and scale of it when I kind of think about A, its location, and then B, I was looking at what 9 feet would look like with the mortar, because it's so hard to get sizes right in renderings. And I'm particularly happy that the applicant did take the recommendation for the, from the design review. I think all of those comments were pertinent at 9'7". So in this case, like if this was a square, like a solid square, I would be completely on board in saying it's an extremely large sign, like say what's behind it. But as a triangle or an arrow thing, it's swaying my perspective on the square footage calculations. My second question has to do with this rendering, and I don't think it's in the purview of what's being presented today, is the sidewalk that's being taken up in this rendering. Is that something that's not proposed, but I guess I probably shouldn't even comment on it if it's not in our purview, but could the applicant speak to, or do you not even know, is that just the rendering you were given?
Yeah, they are planning on putting a patio out front,
Okay, but
kind of like
that's,
Barrio,
yeah,
exactly mimicking Barrio. So kind of that
That's-
feel.
that's just not on today's thing, but I saw that and I noticed. So I can keep that knowledge in my back pocket. So I would agree with the white bottom vinyl version that you're showing. Um, I think it has a little bit more contrast with the existing architecture. You know, there's like kind of beautiful red storefront system. Rather than the orange, it kind of like fades together. I'm very happy that the lettering isn't on the awning. I would agree with Mr. Strickland on that comment. And otherwise, I'm okay with the size. I would see, here's my opinions coming back and forth. I would shrink it maybe a little bit more. I would say meet in the middle. If you could shrink it another 10%. So it's not the full 20% that, because I feel like shrinking at 20%, let me do the math in my brain. That'd be like 7 feet. So if it was like 8 foot, 8 inches, 8 foot 7 inches, that would be like a 10% reduction. I think that might help the scale. And that's just that's I'm gonna leave that there. I'm talking a lot this morning. Thank you though.
Thank you, Jonathan. And we would be fine. I think 10% we can live with. I think that would be, we're just kind of fighting with the arcade next door, and there's kind of a lot of large signage. I don't know if you walk down there, there's many large blade signs. So we're kind of
That's where
trying to be in the middle, you know?
exactly, and I don't know how fair the calculation is to the perceived percentage. But I'm definitely thinking about the 9'7" in terms of its height, and I'm thinking maybe because 20% would shrink it down to 7 feet, which is would really not give you maybe the presence that yourself or your your client, you as the applicant would want. But I think maybe another 10% might get it to a nice, comfortable size where it doesn't feel like a huge flashing, neon moment on Prospect. Although, if there's any street in Cleveland now for a flashing neon moment, it's Prospect Street. So, sure. Thank you. I'll stop. Julie, you might be muted if you said something.
I did. Thank you for letting me know. Thank you, Mr. Benesi. Ms. Anderson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to say that I am in agreement with what Mr. Benesi had to say. I do think the black letters on the white banding at the bottom would probably be easier to read. And I just want to say this is a flashing neon sign, and are the window signs also flashing?
No, nothing will be flashing.
Okay, all right, because it says something about it must flash. I'm like, oh, all right, that's better.
Yeah,
But
no. I'm not sure
okay.
why it says that, but no, it's not flashing.
All right. Thank you.
Yep.
But yeah, I'm in agreement with what Mr. Benesi had to say. So thank you for this nice presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson.
Thank you.
I would agree with what has been said. I would support reducing this by 10% more, using the Barrio sign as the precedent for a sign in that is a supporting in restaurant in the area, or complementing, I should say, restaurant in the area. I do like the graphics of the sign and the colors, and do agree with supporting the white sign band in the windows versus the orange. So I'm in support of the project with those recommendations, or I'm sorry, requirements. Director Wong?
Yes, thank you. I personally have no issue with the larger sign, but I will agree that I'll just agree with my colleagues here that we'll go with the 10% reduction. I did want to just comment and say that I think that it's overall really well done. I do like the kind of throwback to the old school pizza shop style, and I think it'll work really well here on Prospect. So thank you.
Excellent. Hearing much support, would someone like to make a motion? Mr. Benezi?
Before I make my motion, question for Jessica, would a inclusion of a percentage number be acceptable in how to do the variance, or does it have to be like an exact square footage? I can get my calculator. 31,
Good
10% reduction would be 27.9 square foot variance. So 38 square foot or 28 square foot variance? Is that like an accept, Jessica, do you think that's a good way to do it?
Yeah, right now it's a 31 square feet variance, so that would,
And that's what the sign needs, is 31.
yeah, there's a variance for the projecting blade sign that we've been talking about, and then there's also the window informational signs.
Which was what? Which was
That-
which?
That total variance would be 39.27, and that's for the white band at the bottom and slice shop above the awnings.
Okay. That way I do this right. Okay. So with all of the comments being said, I'd like to put forth a motion to approve the project as presented, given the conditions that the white lower signage is used, and that we consider a 10% reduction in the variance for the projecting sign, bringing it to a 28 square foot variance, and also included that an acceptable 39.5 square foot variance be allowed for the internal and vinyl signage.
Do we have a motion? Do we include all of the requirements, Jessica?
Yeah, with 39.27, but yeah, yeah.
We have a motion on the table. Do we have a second?
I will second that.
Thank you. We have a second. Any further discussion?
Yes, Madam Chair, this is Bob Strickland.
Yes.
Just wanted to clarify that I heard the motion as worded as saying consideration of a reduction of another 10%, doing the math on a variance request. And I just wanted clarification whether that was a consideration, a recommendation, or a requirement.
Jessica, did I say consideration or requirement? Because I trip over my words a lot.
You said consideration, but are you stating request for you? Is your motion a requirement?
It's a requirement. My apologies.
All right. Thank you. I was going to clarify that also. So, Mr. Klickia, do you support that revision to the motion?
Yes, I do.
All right. Any further discussion? No. Mr. Musson, please call roll and announce the results.
Ms. Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Benezi,
Yes.
Mr. Kalikia,
Yes.
Mr. Dryer,
Yes.
Director Wong, Mr. Strickland,
Yes,
Mr. Trosick, and Ms. Trott.
Yes.
Madam Chair, the motion passes.
Great.
Thank-
Thank you for the presentation. We look forward to seeing your project move forward.
Thank you all so much. I appreciate it.
We'll now move on to our next applicant located at 1962 Coltman Road. Window door reconfiguration and addition.
All right, good morning. This is Katie Gillette with City Architecture.
Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you very much. I have been working with Christine Grapo, the homeowner at 1962 Coltman renovation. As you can see, this house is on Coltman Road, just a bit north of Mayfield Road in the Little Italy Historic District. The property itself is a front back unit. We're renovating the back property to modernize the house. There is, on this slide, you see the exterior conditions of the house with some notes in terms of what is going to happen with the scope of the exterior work as it relates to the improvements. So on the front porch there, you'll see there is a window and a door. There's actually two doors on the front porch. So we are going to remove the door on the right, the window that is also at the porch, and we're going to put in a pair of windows. And then on the back of the house, there is a cantilever on the second floor, and we are going to build an addition below that cantilever in line with that second floor to provide some additional square footage on the interior of the house. The next slide shows the demolition plans for the house. And the goal here is to modernize this small cozy house. On the next slide are the proposed improvements. And you can see there where the new windows will be going in on the living room, as well as what that configuration of the first floor addition looks like. Again, it's in line with the second floor above it. Next slide, please. The exterior elevations show the new windows. The existing siding of the house is 8-inch white aluminum siding. So on the front porch, our plan is to salvage the existing siding from the back of the house and tooth in around the new windows. They will be vinyl windows. The house today has vinyl windows. And on the also with the front porch work, there will be new composite decking that is part of the front porch. Right now it's painted wood decking. And then on the rear and sides there, you can see where we're building that new addition. We are going to go back with fiber cement siding to match the color and profile of the existing aluminum siding, and we'll trim it out with a 5/4 trim, just to transition between the existing aluminum siding that will remain. And the next slide shows the material palette for the new siding, the 2 new windows on the front of the house. There'll also be a new window on the side of the house over or in the kitchen, and a cut sheet of the new composite decking. Sorry, you're on mute right now.
Sorry, dogs in the background. Thank you for the presentation. We'll move on to Design Review Committee recommendations.
Madam Chair, the project was reviewed by the Little Italy Design Review Committee, but they did not have quorum at the time. They did discuss the vinyl windows and how they are replacing in kind, so taking out vinyl and putting in new vinyl. And they discussed the materials, and on the back going from the aluminum siding to the fiber cement and how that will be connected. But the committee was favorable to the proposal.
Excellent, thank you. And staff report?
Madam Chair, the staff agrees with the comments of the committee and is support the proposal.
Thank you. And we'll open up the floor to the commission for questions and comments. I guess I'll begin. I think this is a very modest renovation and replacing in kind, and really completing the structure from where there are small bites out of it. So I'm in support of the proposal. Mr. Bonezzi.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would agree. This is a very sensitive addition to this very cute house. I appreciate the attention to, even though you can't replicate the materiality, that you're trying to get a similar profile, and then you're noting the seam with the trim board. So I'm in full support of what you're doing. It's a very, very cute house.
Thank you, Mr. Bonezzi. Other questions or comments? Mr. Strickland.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would agree that I think this is a very well done little addition and renovation to this house. And I would propose a motion to approve as presented.
Excellent. Thank you. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
This is Director Huang. I'll second.
Thank you, Director Wong, for the second. Any further discussion? No, Mr. Strickland, do you have another comment?
Oh, Madam Chair, I'm trying to remove my raised hand.
There you go. Okay, Mr. Russin, please call roll and announce the results.
All right, Ms. Anderson?
Yes.
Mr. Bonezzi?
Yes.
Mr. Colicchio? Mr. Dreyer?
Yes.
Director Wong,
Yes.
Mr. Strickland,
Yes.
Mr. Trasick, and Ms. Trout.
Yes.
Madam Chair, the motion passes.
Excellent. Thank you. We look forward to seeing your project move forward.
Thank you.
We'll move on to our next applicants located at 3820 West 33rd Street, fence installation. Oops. We'd like to welcome the applicant to unmute your mic, announce yourself, and tell us about your project. Do we have the applicant present?
Madam Chair, I don't know that we do. I don't see them.
Me neither. All right, so let's do we have a motion to table this project? For us to move forward, could someone make a motion to table?
This is Bob Strickland. I'll motion to table.
Thank you, Mr. Strickland. Do we have a second?
This is Jonathan.
Director.
Go
ahead.
I'll second that.
Thank you. We have a second. Mr. Mustin, please call roll.
Ms. Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Benezzi,
Yes.
Mr. Clicchia, Mr. Dryer,
Yes.
Director Wong,
Yes.
Mr. Strickland,
Yes.
Mr. Trasick, and Ms. Trout.
Yes.
Madam Chair, the motion to table passes.
All right, then we'll move on to the next applicants located. Wait, make sure I was on the right one. Located 1468 West 98th Street, the Marin Seltzer new construction.
Morning.
Good morning.
Madam Chair and Commission members. My name is Jeff Henderson. I'm with TDA Architecture. And also on the call is Sarah Clan, who's with Robert Madison, who's our sort of design partner, project partner on this school. Again, this is the Marion C. Seltzer Pre-K 8 school. You can move on to the next slide, please. And just in summary, again, it's a Pre-K 8 for 450 students. It's about 63,280 square feet, and includes 50 parking spaces on site. So just as a brief summary of the project. Next slide, please. Thanks. And just again, the site location just south of Detroit, sort of between Madison and Detroit, in the Cadell Rec Center Commons area with the clock tower. Next slide, please. Again, just sort of a enlarged site. It's kind of an odd-shaped parcel with the existing school on it. You can kind of see it's where the clock tower is. It's sort of carved out. That's part of the city property, and this is kind of a joint. The property is sort of co-used by both the city and the rec center and the school. So it's that division line is just sort of in the middle of the space. Next slide, please. Again, this is sort of the existing condition. Again, the existing school building is in blue, just north of the fire station and the other buildings that are on Madison. And then the commons area to the north of that. The rec center is obviously to the left. Clock tower just opposite that, and also the Tamir Rice Garden is next adjacent to the parking lot. Next slide, please. So basically, here's the sort of the main elements, existing elements. The rec center, the Tamir Rice Garden, which again has just undergone renovation last summer, and then of course the clock tower. Next slide. So what I want to do is I want to kind of address the comments that we received from design review, just to kind of summarize that. But this is the site, and I think one of the important things to understand is that this project only entails work on the school site. But as I mentioned, it's sort of a shared space with the city, and this was a conceptual plan that was done by the city in terms of improving the commons area and the rec center property, principally with some additional fields potentially to the southwest of the school. But again, this is a conceptual plan. This is not in any way, shape, or form the final design. It's something that will be ongoing on the city side, and that will also include the sort of I'll call it the pedestrian pathway that goes, from the Tamir Rice Garden north to Detroit. Again, so this is just a conceptual plan. Our project really is restricted to the school property. So anything that we're proposing is really on the school property, and knowing that there'll be some further sort of interface with the city as they develop the sort of the final design for that portion. One of the things that, as I think I mentioned prior, is that one of the curious things about this project is that the existing building needs to remain operational during construction. So that really restricts largely where the building can go, and it's sort of ghosted in blue there, just below the new proposed building, where the existing building is now. And we usually typically have about a 30-foot space between the existing building and a brand new building. We've done this several times on other projects within the city with Cleveland Schools. But it does restrict us a little bit in terms of that. But the new proposed building is in the orange, as shown, and we've in early meetings with the city. The idea was to try to maximize that common space between the rec center and the school building, so the building kind of pushes to the east as much as possible, to maximize that space. One of the changes here from the last time that you saw this was the positioning of the pre-KK playground. Originally, it was shown sort of north and west of the proposed building, and we've now shifted that south of the tower along the building, but in the common space, so that's more part of that active area. So we've kind of moved it away from the north end of that. So one of the big comments from design review was, the trees. It's always been kind of a big issue of discussion about the trees that are necessarily need to come down in order to build this, and particularly on the north side. So if maybe we go to the next slide, please. It just kind of shows you some of the trees in the upper right is some of the trees that are just to the east of the tower, which are sort of not in great shape, and those would come down. Along on the right side, on the upper part, is some of those trees at the very north end of the site that again would need to be removed to make room for the construction of the new project. And those were the ones that were kind of in a lot of discussion. The lower left is around the Tamir Rice Garden, and then the two on the lower right are two particular ones that are up on the north side. There's that bald cypress, which is on the left there, and then actually there's two pictures of the bald cypress that shows up there. So go to the next slide. Kind of gives you, well, that's the tree preservation plan that was done. Kind of all the trees on the site were analyzed in terms of species and condition, and ones that were indicated to be removed. And these actually show additional ones that aren't part of the project at this point. And again, it would depend on what happens on the city side of this. So move to the next slide, please. It's kind of a diagram. This one kind of shows the two situations. And on the left is the existing. So you can kind of see the existing building, the parking lot that's on just north of that. And those kind of illustrate the locations of all the trees that are on the site currently. And then on the left where they're indicated in gray, those are the proposed ones that would need to be removed in order to make room for the new construction. And then on the right, then shows the new building, and shows in a lighter gray, or I'm sorry, the lighter green, what's proposed in terms of new landscaping. So trees that are along 98th, along that right-of-way area, around the parking lot on the south, and actually some additional ones that are just east of the Tamir Rice Garden. So that kind of shows you kind of the conditions and situations in terms of the trees. So I think, there were a lot of discussion about those trees on the north side, and some of the ideas that were discussed were made comments about is, can we chop off part of the school building and move it somewhere else in order to preserve those trees? But there really is, the site is very restricted, and if besides the programmatic things that would happen inside the building and doing that, even if you physically took that end of the building and moved it, it would probably have to go into the commons area south of the clock tower, which really works against the whole idea of kind of creating that as one common space. So we can't move the building south, again, because of the existing building that sits there. So there really isn't any place to adjust that. So, I think it's the best solution. I think it's, it maximizes the common area between, on the city property and the school property. And certainly the clock tower becomes the feature of that space. And again, what's shown on the right side is not the future development. It would be what would be left, after the construction of the school piece, but doesn't take into account any redesign that might happen on the city side. So just so you understand that. There was another comment that design review made about the further study of the campus parking. I think there was some talk that maybe we're adding too much parking onto the site. That's not necessary. We are providing 50 spaces on site for staff and visitors, which is more than what they have now. The other piece on this is that we're pulling the buses off of 98th, and I didn't talk about the circulation with the student drop-off and bus drop-off, but 98th is a one-way street to the south, so you loop around to the east and come around there and come down, right now the buses line up on 98th as well as parents. So what we were able to do with the new sort of layout with the parking is actually bring the buses off of 98th onto the site, and then they would exit on 99th. So we have a connection you can see that goes to 99th, where those buses would exit. So we would separate that, allows us to do that. And I think, again, all of the schools that we've done, we've typically provided enough parking on site on the school property for their staff and visitors. Currently, there is an agreement with the city that they can use the parking lot over at Cadell Rec, and mostly it's for pickup. In the afternoon, the parents can use that parking lot to pick up their students. So there is some co-use of the parking facilities, but we would want to maintain the 50 spaces that we have on the school property. Go to the next slide. So this is, and you go to the next slide. This is just this is where we were the last time you saw this. So I just wanted to kind of refresh, because we've made some pretty good changes, I think, or some significant changes from this original presentation that was done, I think back in August. So these were the proposed elevations at that time. Go to the next slide. It's just the other two elevations. And then the next slide kind of is a rendering of the main entry, which is on the south side of the building. And I know there were lots of comments too about this entry piece and whether it was appropriate or not. So some of the big changes that we made since this presentation is the brick what was that chocolate brown brick that you see, the darker brick, we've moved that to a darker red. So we've made that change. And we've revised that front canopy as well. And also the metal panel, which is the gray area on the tall part on the right-hand side, which is the gymnasium. Kind of added a little bit of color to that. So if we go on to the next slide, then it kind of gives you, oh, that's just the plan. So this kind of shows you the floor plan, which really haven't changed at all. But that entry is on the south end where the green is. That's all the administration. And again, it's a 2-story building. And I think one of the things that we're always trying to do is, we wanted to keep it at 2 stories so that the tower was always taller than that. If we would go to a 3-story building, then the scale of the building would kind of maybe could overpower the tower a little bit. So we've always wanted to try to keep it at two levels. But this shows the sort of revised elevations then with the redder brick in the same locations that we had proposed before, but just changing the color. And also the metal panel is now 2 colors, kind of a stone white and a blue that sort of picks off a little bit off of the existing Cadell Rec Center, but giving making it a little more lively. Another one of the comments of design review was the desire to increase the amount of glass in the classrooms. So this actually represents an increase of 50% in all the classrooms. So we've increased the number of windows or the area of glazing that are in the classrooms, and the academic portion is everything on the sort of the left-hand side of this elevation. So there's an increased number of windows into those classroom areas. Go to the next slide. This is probably just the other 2 elevations. So this just shows the east elevation, which is along 98th Street, and then the north elevation, which is along Detroit. And then the next slide, I think, is a rendering of the entry. Oh, no. So these are the materials then, just a blow up of the materials. The 2 gray colors, tan colors are the same that we had presented before. And again, they're sort of in this kind of horizontal pattern in the lighter areas. And then the darker brick is the red. And then the 2 colors in the metal panel on the gym are the blue and the stone white. So go to the next slide. So this is now the front entry. Pretty big change on the entry piece itself. We decided to simplify the canopy. Everything we looked at, I know there was conversation about can we emulate the clock tower in an element, in an entry element, and we really, we really struggled with that, whether that was appropriate or not, and what we could actually do. So we went completely in a different direction, simplified the canopy, made it sort of a curve to give it a little more playfulness, I guess. You can see the red brick. And then there's sort of accent pieces that happen around the building. And then the gym is the taller wall above with the blue and the white. So it kind of is a little more playful in terms of the elevations, in terms of the massing than the previous proposal. Then we go to the last slide, which is really, there was a lot of conversation too about this elevation, which is up against Detroit, and wanting it to be more impactful. I think iconic was one of the words that was used. And I think, and as we looked at this, one of the things that happens is this really is tucked pretty far east. And when you look at the site plan and where this elevation is positioned, as you move along Detroit, it's really at the beginning of the bridge. So, the grade comes up, the bridge starts that goes over the railroad. And it really is tucked to the east as much as possible. It's not really in a prominent location in terms of that. Now, that doesn't mean that doesn't mean that it doesn't need to be well designed, but it's, I think, the iconic piece here is obviously the clock tower. And I think that, currently the clock tower is sort of covered up with the trees and things that are on the north side. It's really not evident in the summertime when you're driving along Detroit that it's even there. So the hope is that, that can somehow get more connected. The tower itself can get more visually connected with Detroit. And that really becomes the iconic element. And we've always thought about the school building as being kind of a respectful backdrop to that. We didn't want to try to replicate that in the architecture of the building. And it was always kind of this edge building, just like the rec center is on the west side. This is sort of the edge building on the east side, and it's really trying to define that common space that's between. And certainly the clock tower is a focal element in that. So I think anybody that's driving west along Detroit and comes along there, that's the when that becomes visually connected with Detroit, I mean that's the piece that everybody will visually connect to. And it's so I think I'm not trying to downplay that north elevation, but I think that's the whole idea of the building, is it really is this kind of edge sort of backdrop to the clock tower and making it, and sort of bringing focus to it. So that's kind of my presentation, and then certainly with questions, I appreciate that.
Excellent. Thank you for the presentation. We'll begin with feedback from the local design review committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This project was reviewed by the Historic West Cleveland Design Review Committee, and they recommended approval with recommendations for tree preservation plan, additional windows or larger sizes of the proposed windows, further study of the campus parking, and more impactful north facade along Detroit, and addition of color elements, many of which were implemented in this current presentation.
Excellent. Thank you for that summary and staff report.
Madam Chair, as Jessica said, the changes were made to the proposal reflecting the comments from the local design review committee, which staff is appreciative of. The project was also seen by the PETBOT committee for review of public right-of-way impacts. And at this point, staff is supportive of this project. They've listened to the comments of the city and been receptive, and I think it's turned out nicely.
Excellent. Thank you. We'll then open up the floor to the commission for questions and comments. All right, I will start us off, and then Mr. Strickland, I do appreciate your sensitivity to the adjacent structures and understand the complexity of working on a site like this, because it's not simple, and trying to really respect the clock tower. I like the revisions that you've made to the entry. But I'm struggling with the metal panels used in restraints like you've done on the north elevation. I like it as an accent and how it celebrates the egress points of the building and entrances, as you've inverted it and placed it on the bottom of the canopy at the main entrance. But I'm struggling with how you've used it as a field on the gym and the other two-story elements that are also on both the east and west elevations. So I think it's taken a little bit too far with the metal panel accents, in my opinion. And so that's the one design feedback, is that I would like to see maybe tempering back the extent of the multicolored metal panels, because I think it's distracting from what you're doing with your brickwork and so forth, is my personal opinion. Mr. Strickland.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My comments are, I appreciate how the applicant has taken our previous comments from the August presentation and those of the Design Review Committee and certainly made adjustments, primarily in terms of color and materiality, that certainly change the impact and the feel of this building. I do like the changes to the north elevation and the entrance canopy. I think that's a tremendous improvement. And but I agree with you, when you look at all the elevations, those two-story metal panel elements just look too busy. And I appreciate the verticality that's kind of emphasized with the way the panels are arranged, but I think that if it was more restrained in terms of the use of alternate colors, it would add to the overall composition of the building. And so I would agree with your suggestion that that be toned down quite a bit. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Strickland. Director Wong?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Excuse me. First of all, I know this is a very challenging geometry on the site. And so thank you to the applicant for working so diligently with all the feedback from the city and the design review committee. The part of the kind of feedback from the city side over the past year was around circulation. And I agree that the entryway canopy is a huge improvement because it sort of opens up and kind of guides you and circulates around the building a little bit more. So it feels a lot more open, and hoping that that south facing light can really kind of come into that entryway. I also just wanted to acknowledge, outside of the building itself, I do agree with toning down the panels for the gym. But I did want to just note for the record that this is a sensitive location. It's a sensitive place. There has been trauma here, and the overall site planning between CMSD, the city, and Ms. Rice has been coordinated and really sort of respecting the space. So I just wanted to note that I'm glad that there's sort of a reclamation of this space that formerly had trauma occurring on it, and so I'm appreciative of the attention and the care to this project. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Wong. Didn't want to speak on mute again. Further questions or comments from the commission? Ms. Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to say I'm in agreement with the comments that have been made. I do a lot of walking, and I have a lot of schools nearby, and I noticed that there is a lot of pickup and drop off traffic at the beginning of the day and the end of the day. So, making sure that the traffic flow is adequate around the entrance area is really important. But yeah, I think it's that second story gym metal panel segment. It's busy, but it's a large mass. So I hopefully there's a way to make that work without being as busy, but without looking like an industrial warehouse sitting on top of another building. So I'm a little uncomfortable with that. The rest of it is nice. I understand that the community is probably not going to be happy that the view of the clock tower is somewhat obscured, especially from the west and somewhat from the north. But the programming here is important, and this school will be a huge improvement to the one that is there. So I support that. So those are my comments.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson. And just to clarify my own comments, I think it's how the metal panels are used on multiple two-story structures. If the metal panels have the purpose of, celebrating the entry points and circulation points for the gym, that is one thing. But right now it's used on the gym, it's used on the cafeteria, it's used on the insets, it's used, and it's a little bit, it needs to, my personal opinion is if you had it focused, so that it is the accent, it would be a stronger solution. Other questions or comments, or would someone like to put forward a motion? Mr. Strickland.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would move to approve as presented, just with the recommendation that the color of the metal panels for the two-story elements be studied and reviewed in detail with staff. I feel like the staff understands our comments sufficiently so that they can work with the applicant to make the necessary adjustments, and they can approve the final design of those two-story elements.
Just to clarify, is it the color that they should be working on or the extent of the metal panels?
Oh, I don't have any problem with the extent of metal panels. It's just the coloration of the panels, in my opinion.
All right, we have a motion. We'll finish it and then we'll go to further discussion. Do we have a second on the motion? Do we have a second on the motion? If we don't get a second, the motion will fail. Do we have a second on the motion? Ms. Anderson?
I'll second the motion.
Thank you. We have a motion. We have a second. Moving to further discussion. Mr. Strickland, would you consider adding the recommendation to study the extent of the metal panels in relationship if they change the color?
So I think we need to provide some direction to the applicant with regard to materiality. If the use of the metal panels is reduced, what material would be preferred in its place? Are you talking masonry in place of the metal panels?
I think that's what they can decide what's the best use of it. You know, I would just say on the two-story areas above the cafeteria and the connection between the gym and the, sorry, I don't have the plan up anymore. Hold on. I can't read the plan on my presentation, but it's, I believe it's a second story. It's a support area on the first floor for the gym and where they've extended it up. I would just consider those central pieces, studying if an alternate material makes sense there.
Well, I would suspect that the metal panel exterior skin is less expensive than the masonry. So I think we need to acknowledge that. And again, whatever adjustments can be made in terms of materiality or colors of the panels, just to soften the impact and define the entrances. I think that's what you're alluding to, is trying to differentiate the different elements of the building. And I think that would be an improvement, but only to the extent that it doesn't really hamper the project in terms of budgetary considerations.
Okay. Mr. Dryer, additional questions or comments?
Just a comment. The blue is not my favorite, but it strikes me that the rec center has blue panels too. And as much as I hate to try to replicate that particular blue, I do think that there ought to be some kind of connection so that the blues don't fight. So that's my only comment.
Thank you, Mr. Dryer. Mr. Bonezzi.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll echo. I guess we should have done this earlier, but in a way, I'm looking back at what the original facade was, and where this gray was kind of particularly contained to that volume. Am I moving slowly? Okay, no, it's just me. And when in deliberation of the cost, though, from being also a fellow person in the construction architecture field right now, metal panels are surprisingly equal to value of masonry when it comes to installation costs. They're especially a concealed fastener system such as that. It's an incredibly time-exhaustive process of the aluminum track rails that have to go behind everything, and the installation process is actually very difficult. I had to watch my project move very slowly because of it, versus the masonry went up like super fast. And when labor is very expensive compared to materials, that can offset our perceived value of materiality. Not to discredit any of what the materials should be. I think from an architectural standpoint, I would agree with Julie that, this especially when it's just these little moments where it's like, where before there was the use of different tonalities in masonry to define, thinking of this west elevation, why does the metal panel just suddenly pop up at that one spot? Instead of and same thing on the east elevation. I think there was a very subtle use of masonry before, and kind of the elegance of the art of masonry as a way to define these entries and a way to define these moments. And that would relieve the metal panel situation, which does want to be at the higher elevations. It wants to be somewhere where it's light and it can float on the building. And we don't have really heavy materials up there, which then introduces structural costs and et cetera. So in that case, I would support what Julie's trying to get after, which is a recommendation to focus the metal panels into a situation where the materiality matches its A, constructability, and then B, its overall composition in the architecture. Sorry, I should have said a lot of these things earlier, but I was just like trying to process my thoughts. So that's my thoughts.
Great, thank you, Mr. Benezzi. So there,
Chair, I think it might be helpful to get some feedback from the applicant with regard to his, understanding of our comments, so that we can get the motion right and something.
And I appreciate that, Mr. Strickland. And I agree, and I understand completely, I think, where you're going. I like the idea of focus. And I think that's a good term because yes, it's sort of scattered around, and there's nothing consistent necessarily, and I'm criticizing my own design now. So nothing consistent about where it's used necessarily in the idea of a focus. So I think I understand that completely. And it might be, again, the color may be part of that, and it might be material might be part of that. And I think it's just I think it's a relook maybe again at trying to fine tune that and make it clearer in terms of where the metal panel is and why it's there. I think that makes a lot of sense. I understand it completely.
excellent, thank you. And that's what we were just going to ask, of the clarity. So I think that's the consideration to look at the color or the extent is what we're asking, and that can be brought back to staff for the final solution.
Okay.
So with that, any further discussion? All right, then we will move on to Mr. Musson. Please call roll and announce results.
Madam Chair, Ms. Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Benezzi,
Yes.
Mr. Clicchia,
Yes.
Mr. Dryer,
Yes.
Director Wong,
Yes.
Mr. Strickland,
Yes.
Ms. Trott.
Yes,
Madam Chair, the motion passes unanimously.
excellent. Thank you. We look forward to seeing your project move forward.
Thank you, and I appreciate all the input. I absolutely do. Thank you very much.
We'll now move on to the concept plan reviews. We have one applicant today, and it is located at, there you go, 3911 John Avenue, Phase 2 Garage Addition. Morning, Ms. Marinucci, please unmute your mic and tell us about your project.
Hi, good morning to the commission. We are here with Phase 2 Garage Addition to my client's property at 3911 John Avenue. It's a restoration / addition effort that is currently underway. We came before the commission and went through the design review process in 2021. So I'm going to go through a little refresher of what was previously approved. And you can see the plans here. We kind of demoed the rear half of the building to reconstruct as a larger addition and restored the front of this little workman's cottage in Ohio City. And it's currently under construction. So the renovation and reconstruction portion are underway. Again, this is what was previously approved. That red line denotes the salvaged, restored effort to the front of the property, and then the new construction effort to the rear. Next slide. So this was the previously approved plan and massing. We originally intended to include the garage and family room above in the original design, and I think that you guys probably saw it at the concept level, a couple years ago, but for budget purposes, they decided to phase it out into a phase 2, and we did get approval to kind of have this sort of mudroom breezeway situation at the rear of the house, with the intention of doing the attached garage. That would make that massing feel a little bit more sensible. So now that is where we are at now. Next slide. This again is previously approved colorways. We had a light, kind of like ivory neutral front, and then had the pewter green at the rear, the new construction portion. So just a pretty neutral palette, which we are planning to continue, as you'll see. Next slide. So now we're moving into the proposed plans for the garage portion of the project. I'm calling it a garage. It is a garage with a family media room space above and a roof deck above that. So it is a bit more than just an attached garage. So here on the first floor, it's just going to be a 2-car garage. Second floor plan is that family room space. Third floor is just a little pop-up receiving, those stairs with some storage, and the roof deck. Next slide. So just a little existing context. It's on John Court. It's an alley that has a lot of different uses. There's some primary residences, there are some ADUs, there are a lot of garages and open parking spaces, but it is a pretty eclectic mix of use back on that alley. And then the lower photo is the backyard prior to construction, so you can sort of see context to the neighboring properties. Next slide. And then I wanted to show current photos. They're about 4 weeks old at this point from when I compiled this, but it's essentially the same, where you can see the framing, the new construction effort, the work being done. The front of the house needed quite a bit of shoring up, but we were able to save nearly all of the existing structure just with lots of cisterns. Next slide. So looking at the elevations of what we'd like to do for this garage component, we wanted to keep with the feel and context of the house, keep the same language, windows are consistent, colorway and materiality is consistent. They want to continue hardy board and aluminum clad wood windows throughout the space. So what you're looking at here is the east elevation to see how the massing interacts with the existing, I shouldn't say existing, with the underway home in the previously proposed or approved plans. And south elevation, which faces John Court, and it's about, that elevation is pulled back about 6 feet from the parcel line. So, which is consistent with garages along the alley. They seem to vary from pretty much no parcel line to about 5 to 8 feet. Seems consistent. And then we chose to turn the gable of that top piece to provide a little bit of texture and kind of break up the wall of that kind of rear facade, what becomes the rear facade. And then that north elevation is interior to the backyard, so it creates like a courtyard, yard space to the rear. Next slide, please. And that's the color palette. We're pretty much just wanting to continue the pewter green. And again, the same roofing, which I did not label, and I believe it's weathered brown. Mindful gray is the accent that's being proposed on the roof deck elements to match the trim of the porch elements at the front. And then a bronzed aluminum clad window and a bronze garage door. So essentially dark brown. the fancy term for that. We saw Ohio City Design Review Committee last week, and one comment, there were a couple comments on the fenestrations, like maybe striking a different balance with the windows facing John Court, as well as seeing if we could get the height down just to be level or slightly below the main gable, the tallest gable of the front half of the property. Which, I think both are worth considering. So I'm anxious to hear what you all feel on this committee. I think that's it. Yep.
Darn thing. Well, thank you for the presentation. We will move on to design review committee feedback.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As was mentioned, the project was seen at the Ohio City Design Review Committee, and they discussed, as mentioned, the proportionality of the windows along the alley. Possibly the smaller windows could be larger or in line with the larger windows on that second level. Adding lights around the garage door, and they did discuss the height of the garage to be at the house level or lower, and the massing of visibility from John Avenue, as well as that roof deck possibly stepping the north and south walls back a little bit at that roof deck level.
All right, thank you for that summary. We'll move on to staff report.
Madam Chair, to the Commission, staff is in agreement with the Design Review Committee. We're generally in favor of the project and the design, with a few of the small items to address.
All right, thank you for that report also. We'll move on to questions or comments from the Commission. I guess I will begin. I would agree with both the committee and staff's recommendation. I feel that the height is too dominant based on the care you've taken with the previous additions, and trying not to overwhelm the existing building. I think if it was brought down to the height of the largest structure on the property, it would be a better composition across the property. I also agree with the comment on the windows that they feel out of proportion related to the windows that are used throughout the new addition, the main two-story addition. And so I would agree with trying to unify some of the sizes of the windows with the two-story addition so that it feels like it's an extension versus a separate structure. I don't mind the colors and obviously the continuation of it, because it does just celebrate that this is the new structure, but how it's working with the existing. So those are my comments at this time. Director Wong.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm curious if if we could go back to a slide where there's a front facade view. I wanted to see how the back portion would appear. Okay, so based on this, that back addition would not be seen from the front? Because I'm seeking maybe a rendering or some sort of like view that would show the height of.
If you go to the, sorry, I did not render it from the front.
Okay.
If you go down the, Dan, you keep going. There is one that shows it from, well, those are photos from the front. Effectively, no, you would not see or I think perceive the change in height, but this south elevation, which it's a little bit hard, I guess, to see. It's light on the screen. You can see the ghosted kind of like, the rear gable. Thank you, Dan. Showing how that's probably the closest to what you're asking for. Also, if it wasn't, these drawings are at different scales. If that was not clear, that the south and north I've shown at a larger scale than the full elevation on the east, just for
And
composition on this
can you share
presentation.
again the purpose of why it's the height that you've selected?
That's a really good question, and honestly, I'm not sure that it needs to be a little bit taller. I think I was just drawing in section, and I don't know that it needs to be. I think I
Oh
think it
yeah,
came
I'm
down.
yeah, I was
I'm
trying to
okay
I
with
was
that.
trying to see why it was at
No,
that level versus down
I
more. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
I'm sure there was a reason, but
Okay.
maybe
Is
it
it,
just
I mean,
shook
I
out
was
that way and I didn't catch it.
yeah, I'm mostly curious, like from a building code perspective, was it, was that the purpose of it being that tall? If it
I mean,
can be reduced.
I am dealing with, there's a slight level change from the grade at the, where the car is pulling in and where the grade of the concrete will be. So there's a step up into the house.
Okay.
But I think I had a reason for the floor plate heights. I thought, I genuinely am not sure. I don't honestly.
Okay.
I don't know. I
Yeah.
think it's definitely agreeable and achievable to just bring down probably that, whichever floor plate needs to come down to make that come down a bit.
Yeah. I think it's worth investigating. But because it's so far back and it faces the John Court alleyway, I don't mind it as much. I do think it's worth investigating. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director Wong. Ms. Strickland?
Madam Chair, could we go back to a site plan that shows the new garage addition? I'm just wondering what the rear setback is from the alley to the garage, how deep of an apron there may be.
It's not dimensioned on there, but it's about 6 feet.
Yeah, so, yeah, I agree with the comments that it just seems too massive of a structure fronting the alley that closely. And so agreeing that you really can't see it from John Avenue. Just that mass on the alley, I think would be too dominant. So if you were able to lower that somewhat and perhaps use more of an open rail at the roof deck rather than a solid parapet.
Yeah,
That
that's a
might
great
just-
suggestion. Dan, if you could go to the existing alley photo, I think it is worth noting that there are full, like 2.5-story primary homes along this alley as well. I think you can kind of see there's 2 directly across the alley. It's not, I guess it's not a totally foreign introduction of this, of a multi-story element on the alley in this location. I like the open rail suggestion.
All right. That's
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Strickland. Ms. Anderson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I agree with Mr. Strickland and the chairwoman regarding the massing of the structure in the back and the height. There's just a lot of massing on this site. So I think if it could be reduced slightly and with the open rail, that'll give it a visual reduction as well. I think that would be an improvement. So those are my comments.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson.
I have a question for the committee. The design review, local design committee's, a suggestion was to step back the roof pop-up portion, the little top piece. This is driven by just making sure my structural alignment is in place. So stepping it back would just take a little more consideration structurally speaking. Does this committee feel strongly either way on that?
I personally don't think it needs to step back. What's the plan function within that 3rd story? Is it just an access stair?
It's the top. Yeah, it's the staircase. There's a landing with enough maneuverability if they needed to have a little bit of storage in there. And then there is a storage closet.
Right. I personally don't think it needs to be stepped back as much as I do feel that the railings need to be addressed. So I personally don't feel it needs to step back.
Okay.
Other feedback from commission members? Not seeing any additional feedback, do you feel like, I'm sorry, additional hands, do you feel like you've received enough feedback from the commission to continue on the design of your project?
Yes.
All right, excellent. Well, we look forward to seeing you back in the near future.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. That concludes our concept plan reviews. We'll move on to the National Register of Historic Place nominations. Mr. Musson, will you be leading this?
Yes, Madam Chair, thank you. Yes, today we have the Arnold Wooden Ware Company building. Is designed by prominent Cleveland architect Charles Hopkinson and built in 1921. It's being nominated for the National Register of Historic Places under Criterion A in the area of commerce as one of the few remaining physical representations of the wooden ware industry in Cleveland. While the Arnold Wooden Ware Company was established in the mid to late 1800s, this building, which was built as offices and warehouse space, was constructed at a time when the wooden wares industry had already begun fading from popularity, with the prevalence of plastics emerging at about the same time as our forest resources were being depleted. The building evolved as the company changed along with consumer demand, shifting from wooden wares to appliances like Zenith and Sylvania. A rear warehouse addition was added in the 1950s and another in roughly 1970, in addition to connect the rear warehouse with the 1921 building. The building remains in its historic location and original setting within the mixed-use commercial and residential neighborhood. The 1921 neoclassical style building exhibits design of both interior and exterior architectural elements. The retention of the historic fabric, materials, and craftsmanship is evident in the neoclassical exterior features and office and warehouse, or industrial form, rather. The 1950 and circa 1970 warehouse additions accommodated the increased demand of the company, with a period of significance beginning in 1921 with the construction of the office building and ending in 1975 when the company ceased operations in this building. So staff recommends advancing this nomination, which would go before the State Preservation Board next month.
Excellent. Thank you for that presentation. We'll open up the floor for questions and comments from the commission. Director Wong?
Yes, quick question. Is the council person in support?
I'm uncertain of that, Director.
Is the owner in support?
Yes, I believe the owner is the one who's been pursuing this nomination.
All right, thank you. Other questions, Director Wong?
Sorry about that. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Other questions or comments? I mean, I think it's a great building that has been celebrated by the community and obviously maintained by the ownership, which we do appreciate. So I'm in support of the nomination. Mr. Benezzi?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, in such a prominent part of town in Detroit, as we're seeing lots of growth on this street, in particular, I know of two of my friends' projects that are catty corner to this building, and it's a very well-preserved building. It's always a joy to drive by it, and it's one of those little moments when you're driving down Detroit, you're like, oh, that's so nice, which doesn't happen often when you're driving by something and something still looks nice. So I'm in complete support of the nomination for this building. I like how they shoved an auditorium next to it, though.
Yeah. Joint uses, right?
Joint uses, perfect. But yes, that's all.
All right, other questions or comments? Would someone like to motion? I want to make sure I have this right. Recommendation for nomination, is that correct? Dan?
Yes, sir, the motion for the advancement of the nomination, I think is how.
Thank you.
I second that.
Giancarlo, would you like to make the motion since Mr. Musson cannot?
Oh, that's great. I make the motion that we approve as presented.
Excellent. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
All right, so we have a motion, we have a second. Any further discussion?
Wondering, Madam Chair, if we could adjust the language of the motion to say advance the building on. Dan, can you repeat what you said? Advance the building through the process. Is that right?
Yes, so essentially advancing the nomination through the approval process with the State Preservation Office.
Mr. Colicchia, is that the intent of your motion to for the advancement of the building through the nomination process?
Yes, for the advancement of the nomination process.
Right, thank you.
I second that.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All right, then Mr. Musson, please call roll and announce the result.
Okay. Ms. Anderson?
Yes.
Mr. Benezzi?
Yes.
Mr. Colicchia?
Yes.
Mr. Dryer?
Yes.
Director Wong?
Yes.
Mr. Strickland?
Yes.
And Ms. Trott?
Yes.
Madam Chair, the motion passes unanimously.
Excellent. Then we'll move on to, I think it's chair's reports. Oh, no, I'm sorry, design review committee appointments.
Yes, we have a lot of I guess administrative business on this agenda. So for I guess, Madam Chair, the Landmark staff has spoken with and reviewed the resume of Madison Wakama for inclusion in the Historic West Cleveland Design Review Committee. Ms. Wakama lives in the West Boulevard Historic District, which is now under the jurisdiction of the Historic West Cleveland Design Review Committee. She has master's degrees in architecture and urban design and currently works as a studio designer with HSB Architects and Engineers. Staff feels that her experience, professional and personal, would make her a great addition to the Design Review Committee and recommends approval of her appointment.
Excellent. Thank you for that. I've also reviewed her resume and agree with that recommendation. Other questions or comments from the commission? If not, would someone like to make a motion?
I'll make the motion to appoint her to the to the Historic West Cleveland Historic District.
Thank you. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second then.
Thank you, Mr. Strickland. Any further discussion? All right, then Mr. Musson, please call roll and announce the results.
Ms. Anderson?
Yes.
Benezzi?
Yes.
Mr. Colicchia?
Yes.
Mr. Dryer?
Yes.
Director Wong?
Yes.
Mr. Strickland?
Yes.
And Ms. Trott?
Yes.
Madam Chair, the appointment passes.
Is Ms. Wakama? Nope.
She was here and I believe she had to leave. She had, I know she had meetings this morning, so she was gonna, but I think she was here and had to leave.
Okay, excellent. We'll move on to meeting minute approvals.
All right, Madam Chair, last week I emailed out draft minutes for 3 meetings, January 12th, 2023, September 22nd, 2022, and December 8th, 2022. So a little more current than some of the ones we looked at previous meeting. But yeah, staff is asking for approval.
All right, thank you. Does anyone have any questions or comments on the meeting minutes? Could you change the next slide that says the dates for everyone?
Sorry.
Nope, that's perfect. Does anyone have any questions or comments on the meeting minutes?
Need to be reminded, Madam Chair, can we do this in a joint motion or do we have to do this individually?
Mr. Musson, if can we do it joint if we read the 3 dates separately?
Yes, that's my understanding unless Mr. Hall has a recommendation contrary. I believe we can make one motion to approve all three if we state the dates.
I don't see any problem with doing a motion with all three.
With that understanding, I would move to approve the meeting minutes for the landmarks meetings on January 12th, 2023, December 8th, 2022, and September 22nd, 2022.
Thank you. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I second that.
Thank you for the second. Any further discussion? All right, Mr. Musson, please call roll and announce the results.
Ms. Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Benesi,
Yes.
Mr. Clicchia,
Yes.
Uh,
Mr. Dryer,
Yeah.
Director Wong,
Yes.
Mr. Strickland,
Yes.
and Ms. Trott.
Yes.
And Chair, the motion passes unanimously.
Excellent. We'll move on to chair's report. There's not a chair's report today. Secretary's report.
All right, Madam Chair, to the Commission, we do have a site visit scheduled for Friday, February 17th at 1 o'clock at St. Ignatius to look at a demolition proposal. And then I would also, I guess, just wanted to share that with the appointment of Ms. Walkman and last week, Ms. Banks to the Historic West Cleveland Design Review Committee, we're in good shape for the Historic West Cleveland Committee. As part of the restructuring of design review we've been going through, we've had issues making quorum at some of the committees, including Ohio City, which is one of our more busy and active committees. So with that being said, we're going to move Phil Talley and Michael Sandbury from the Historic West Cleveland Committee over to the Ohio Design Review Committee. They've both been, appointed by the commission, so it's more an administrative shuffling than looking at new members. But that being said, that's the extent of my report this week.
All right, excellent. I think that then concludes our agenda for today, and we will adjourn our meeting and see everyone in 2 weeks. So thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you, Madam
Hi,
Chair.
everyone.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.